it's Girls Camp. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Girls Camp podcast. I'm your host, Haley Rawl, and today we are venting and unpacking together the stories of our family reunions. In July, I had 2 family reunions very back to back. One of them was over a weekend, and the next one started that next Wednesday. One was with my side of the family, one was with Bentley's side of the family. It was a whole lot of family reunion in not a lot of time. I'll say that much. I have always had some pretty benign family reunions, I would say. We did an episode on this last year, and I remember saying nothing really goes down at mine. It's all chill. It's not like anything crazy necessarily happened at the family reunions this year, but definitely some things that I do want to talk about. And I greatly enjoyed reading the stories that you all wrote in about your family reunions as well. I want to read this write-in right off of the top. Someone said, "This is not a story, but I just have to say, other than Mormon or ex-Mormon influencers I follow, I have never heard anyone talk about family reunions in real life. I know people who still go on family vacations, occasionally with their immediate family, like maybe every other year or so, but even that doesn't seem as common now that I'm 30 plus years old. I recently heard someone, ex-Mormon, refer to this kind of trip as a family reunion, and that was crazy to me. But even the bigger style reunions where it's cousins and aunts and uncles, etc., like dozens and dozens of people, is something I think is fairly rare outside of Mormon culture." I got that right in. Someone else said, "Is this a Mormon thing? I am from the East Coast and genuinely don't know any families who do reunions. I'm so curious if it's a Mormon specific thing." Well, my poor little Mormon brain had no idea that there could be a Mormon influence on having a family reunion. I mean, obviously, I know that a Mormon family reunion is a particular thing than probably most family reunions, but I always just thought that that's a thing that oftentimes extended families do. They do family reunions. I tried to look this up. I tried to figure out how Mormon a family reunion is generally, since so many of you were pointing this out to me. It's a bit difficult to know for sure, as you can imagine. There's not tons of statistics on family reunions. However, I did find a few Reddit threads where people were saying, hey, those of you who live in America, because I guess this is more of an American thing, are you still doing family reunions? If so, how many people come? And people were saying, yes, they still do family reunions. I guess some of those people could have been Mormon, but reading some of the context, I don't think they were. I found a New York Times article in 2013 talking about family reunions. Are they a dying art? Are they still happening? They are still happening to some extent. I did find this statistic, though this is on a website called Historic Acres of Hershey, and it's just an article they wrote. They didn't link to their sources, so take this for what you will. But they said a 2018 survey showed that 68% of Americans have attended a family reunion and 28% report holding them annually. Now, this gets tricky too because family reunion can mean a whole lot of things. In the Mormon context, it often means renting a place or places like cabins, a big cabin, a series of cabins, what have you, an Airbnb, and having grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins, grandkids, great-grandkids, all in one place. Where for some people, a family reunion could entail meeting up for the day at a park and like doing a barbecue with like extended family that you don't see very frequently. So I'm sure it varies a lot across the board when we're saying family reunion, what it actually means by that. But I was genuinely super surprised to hear that many of you have not attended a family reunion, or that's just like not a culturally normal thing wherever you're from. I might throw up some polls on Instagram to get a feel for who has been to one. I'm really curious about the regional aspect of things. I'm guessing it kind of depends where you grow up too. So I don't know, maybe I'll throw together a mini little Girls Camp podcast Instagram study because now I'm very intrigued. And for those of you who have never attended a family reunion, you might find this episode particularly entertaining. I think that the idea of a family reunion can be a little weird anyway, but then you add a Mormon element onto it, as many of these have. You just have a circumstance ripe for some crazy stories to happen, which is why we made it a prompt today. I'm going to start with a story of my own, and I've been thinking a lot about this since it happened because I went to a family reunion. It's kind of nice. We had 2 back-to-back, so hopefully I can maintain like some anonymity here for like the people involved. But at one of the family reunions, we were there on a Sunday, and on the schedule for the reunion was a devotional. And devotional in Mormon terminology is a pretty loose term. It basically means we're all going to get together and have some sort of meeting, probably with a spiritual bend, but maybe not necessarily. We're in church clothes because my cousin had recently got back from a mission. My cousin. Okay, it was my side of the family. I don't think this is like derogatory or anything. We sit down in church clothes because we're going to go to this homecoming at church later, but we're in like this clubhouse where we had met up for breakfast. There are, 6 siblings in the family who all have kids, and a lot of those kids have kids. So we're dealing with, a lot of people couldn't come this year, but I would say there was probably like 50 people there this morning that we were doing this devotional. And my grandpa was like, let's all go around the room and share, I don't remember exactly how he worded it, but it was like the highs and lows of this year with your family or something like that. It wasn't overtly spiritual. So I'm actually near the front of the circle. A few people kind of share what happened in their year. I'm talking about like things going on in Bentley's career that are exciting, how the twins are. I was talking about going to therapy as like a really big thing for me this year. And then after I go, there's a succession of like 5 people who all end up essentially just bearing their testimony of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. They're like kind of talking about their lives, but very much within this like spiritual, like the blessings they've seen from God, from going to church. And there's a family member who lives in another state outside of Utah, and they were talking about like how it feels like a mission, and their whole purpose is to meet people and show them the goodness of the gospel and the joy that comes from living righteously. Just a lot of language like that. And it was interesting because I haven't felt triggered in this way in a long time. But I was sitting there feeling like a little speck of dust in this room of people talking about the gospel and the church and how it makes them good people and how it keeps them grounded and how the blessings that they've seen from living the gospel perfectly. It wasn't pointed at me, but being the only one in the room who was openly out of the church. Bentley had taken our twins out, by the way, because they were being crazy. They have no idea what church is, so they like don't get the concept of like sitting quietly in like that sort of context. So Bentley had taken them out, and I was just sitting there feeling so unintentionally, I think, but so singled out and so small, and just feeling like all of these messages, which is what's so tricky about religion generally, maybe Mormonism specifically, is when people are saying how much they love their church, their gospel, their beliefs. So often it comes with this insinuation that if you don't share those beliefs or you don't live that same way, that you are living a lesser life and even sometimes are a lesser person, because that's just kind of baked into the language. Like I said, hearing someone say, yeah, it's such a blessing to be able to show people the joy that comes from living life and doing what's good, I think was what they said. And I was just like, okay, so even though you're not saying it, part of what you're saying is that I'm not living in a good way, according to you. And because everyone here knows that I'm not part of that church anymore, it just kind of felt like everyone was kind of sensing this, and maybe I was just making this all up. But I felt really uncomfortable and also really sad. And Bentley and I were talking about it later, and we were saying there's this weird thing that also happens because I feel very close to my extended family, and I feel so fortunate and so lucky. I love them all so dearly. They treat me the same as they did before. with so much kindness and so much love. It's just like not really been a thing. Not only that I left the church, but also that I come here and I talk about it, and I talk about it online. And I just feel really fortunate that we've all been able to like maintain relationships despite that. And I want to make that note because I do want to like assume the best intentions and also understand, like, I think the lesson I learned from this is next year, I just won't go to that. Like, I just don't need to put myself in that position. And if that's important for them to go do and to share about their testimonies in that way, they can do so. And I like don't need to be there. But Bentley and I were discussing it afterward. And I was saying it's so weird because it almost feels like we're with each other. We're having so much fun. We're all together. There's this unity and connectedness. And then as soon as that church switches, and we're in this church mode where people are talking about the church, there just feels like there's this automatic divide. And it almost feels like an alter ego, like different persona, where it's like, wait, we all get along so well. And yet there's this thing that you can switch into, which is like, no, I know what's right. I know what's good. And you don't, or you did and you abandoned it. And again, I'm projecting. That's not what they were saying. But I think anyone, if you know, like it feels like that's what they're saying. Anyway, we were still going around the room and it was one of my cousin's turn. And my cousin starts talking and he just shared this story where he said he works in hospice. So he helps people nearing end of life. He does end of life care because he's in med school right now. And he was talking about this family and he said, yeah, like I met this family and I didn't think we'd have much in common. He was kind of insinuating like they don't believe the same things as I do. They have a different lifestyle than I do. And he said, they've come to be my very favorite people in the world. And I've learned so much from them. And they are so Christ-like and so loving. And I just started sobbing, like big fat tears rolling down my cheeks, listening to him say that, because it just meant so much to me in that moment to have someone say, like, it's not about being Mormon. It's not about being Mormon. And being good and being Mormon are not mutually exclusive. And it's insane that that even needs to be said. But I just really appreciated him saying, like, his highlight of his year, even spiritually, was meeting and connecting with these people who believe and think and live differently than he does. And yet they have so much in common and they love each other so dearly. And after he went, a few more people went and people started talking about the temple. And I was like, you know what? Some of the other little kids there, like the great grandkids, were getting antsy. So I was like, come with me. And we all just went downstairs and played with Bentley and the girls. So I just excused myself for the rest of the time, which I think, like I said, was maybe what I should have done in the first place. But it just got me thinking about how big of a wedge beliefs can be when they're used in that way, when there's an assumption that like everyone should think or believe a certain way. And if you don't, how isolating and sad that feels. And I just haven't been in a position like that for a really long time. Other than that, though, it was great. Actually, other than that, I also accidentally ate a piece of pizza, normal, not gluten-free. They had set aside some pizza for my mom and I that was gluten-free, but I didn't know they also had put a dairy-free pizza next to it for my cousin who's dairy-free. So I accidentally ate a slice of the dairy-free pizza and was in absolute hell for that whole night. Eating gluten has gotten so bad for me. It's crazy like how exaggerated my symptoms have gotten in the past year or so. And I'm trying not to think about it too hard. I'll cross that bridge when I absolutely must, but I have to start being more careful because same thing. I think it was in a mixed drink actually, but I was a +1 on a brand trip with my friend Kylie and I accidentally got gluten. I think it was in a mixed drink because they were being super careful. They knew I was gluten-free, but I had this toasted sugar like rum drink and I got super sick again. And I'm just like, I can't keep getting this sick. So that was also a bummer. And bummer on a family reunion, like not ideal. Although we did have our own room on that one. My other family reunion thought right here off the bat is I don't think I will be sharing space with family again. I'll just leave it at that. Close quarters are tricky And as adults, especially as adults with kids, when you are trying to fit a lot of people in a space, which I get with these big family reunions, it's just like, I need my own room and ideally my own bathroom. And I think moving forward with family reunions, if that is not on the table, we will either find a way to do that ourselves or maybe not be attending because it's just too tight of quarters. And family reunions just bring out the drama, the dysfunction. Every family has it, but just being in that close quarters really exacerbates it. And yeah, that's another lesson learned from my family reunion season this summer. Let's hop into your stories. Someone said, 2 of my uncles got in a full-on fist fight over flag football. That's the first and last family reunion I can ever remember doing for that side of the family. Probably for the best. And this is what I'm talking about. Sometimes you just don't need to get the whole family in close quarters, playing games together, competition. Sometimes it is just not worth it, as is evidenced with 2 uncles fist fighting over flag football. On my dad's side, we trace our roots back to a polygamist great-great-grandfather. He had 4 wives, and one of them was just 14 years old when she became his 3rd wife. A few years back, some cousins organized a family reunion to honor our great-grandfather. I won't mention his real name since he's pretty famous in the church, so let's just call him Nate. I'm not sure who thought it was a good idea to have a recreation theme, but they held auditions to find a family member who looked a lot like Nate. They also asked for a female volunteer from each of the families of the polygamist wives to portray his 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th wives. From what I heard, there was a lot of bickering among the women about who would get the honor of playing these roles. The reunion was super awkward. The so-called family actors pretended to be Nate and his 4 wives for the entire week. They talked and dressed as if they had been transported to modern times. Amazed by all the newfangled clothes and technology, people were flocking to Nate, fawning over him, and some were even crying over the miracle of having their great-great-grandfather back. The wives mostly got ignored or were talked about as if they were just a group instead of individuals. Those 4 women followed Nate around everywhere as that was their only role. At one point, they were laughing and joking about my great-great-grandmother, his 4th wife, whom he married in his 40s when she was just 19. The joke was that he married her because she was a midwife, which saved him money on doctor bills since she took care of his 3 wives during their pregnancies and delivered all the many babies in the family. I was furious. My great-great-grandmother had 13 kids of her own and had no one to help her but the other inexperienced women. Wow. Maybe I should have saved that for a little later in the episode after we'd warmed up a little bit. Cosplaying a great-great polygamist grandfather and his 4 wives. Taking it so far as to pretend the whole week that they were like transported to modern times. I'm wondering if there is some sort of through line, some sort of something that explains why Mormons are so into cosplay, or if Mormons are so into cosplay. I guess the only thing that I'm thinking here is Trek, like cosplaying the pioneers. But this level of cosplay feels weird, not only because you're cosplaying a polygamist man and his young wives, one of whom was a literal teenager, which even if you like defend polygamy, even if you're a polygamy apologist, celebrating it to that extent by like bringing it back to life is just a whole different level. But grown adults like being that comfortable acting throughout the whole week, something feels Mormon about it. And I'm curious if there are connections between Mormons and like acting cosplay stuff and why that might be the case. I'm also now super curious who this great-great-grandfather, polygamous great-great-grandfather is, who had 4 wives. I bet I could track him down. I mean, I'll protect your anonymity. I completely understand, but a big name in the church, huh? My Mormon family reunions are so big that everyone wears a name tag with their name and the number of what order they were born in. Cry, 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 skull. Many of you wrote in the same thing, that when you go to your Mormon family reunions, there are so many people, not everyone knows each other. So not only do they have to wear name tags, they have to put the number in the family that they are. This is where I think Mormon family reunions get potentially quite different from other ones because the families are just so damn big. You have a big family of origin. They all have kids who get married young and have kids young. So it's just like this ever expanding family, which just lends itself to different types of activities, different type of vibe than maybe a typical non-Mormon family reunion. The sheer size of Mormon families is a marvel in and of itself. My grandma discovered that her dad had gotten a woman pregnant before he married his wife. So she organized a full family reunion for the, quote, bastard child, where she introduced him to all 5 of her siblings and all 8 of her kids and 48 grandkids. Okay, so just to clarify, this person's grandma discovered that she had a half-sibling that her dad had had with another woman before he married her mom. Upon this discovery, she coordinated a whole family reunion with the kids and the grandkids to bring this new family member in to meet everybody all at one time. For that person's sake, I do hope that there was name tags. Maybe birth order would be less relevant, but I do hope that there was name tags because that would be so insanely overwhelming to meet that many new family members at once. I mean, it's kind of nice like to bring this guy in and, you know, make the family connection, but the fact that she referred to him as the bastard child makes me feel like the vibes were probably a little bit weird. The summer after my grandma died, we did a family reunion for the first time in years. One of my aunts kept telling everyone she had a surprise for the last day. The surprise was that they all had a secret uncle from an affair. She found out doing the Mormon genealogy. I should also mention that that aunt is married to her 4th cousin and only found out because of that. What is with all of these surprise family members popping up for you all? I don't think, knock on couch, that I have any surprise family members. I haven't discovered any surprise family members yet, though I do know that that is one of the drawbacks, I guess you could consider it also a benefit of the Mormon push to do family history and like genealogy, is people will do like their ancestry test, the one where you like spit in the thing and send it in and it does your DNA. A lot of things have been found out that way, but Mormons, you know, are really into that kind of stuff, and you might just discover a long lost sibling, uncle, etc. I can't get over this aunt being like, I have a surprise, like, ooh, last day, hang in there for the surprise. Surprise, you have an uncle, because there was an affair that produced a child. It's like, oh, okay, some surprise indeed. My husband's extended family, his mom has 13 siblings who all had a whole mess of children, does a massive summer reunion every other year, and the main event each time is a big talent show, which is so deeply and exceptionally Mormon. Probably one of the most deeply and exceptionally Mormon things about me as an individual is that I fuck with a talent show. I love a talent show. I think they're so wholesome, so entertaining. I love when you just have like this type of talent show where it's just like no one's really all that talented, but it's like, everyone's got to get up there and do something, sing a song, do a dance, whatever. I think it's really fun for the kids. I grew up doing talent shows all the time. I feel like every Sunday at my grandma's house, we were like, we have a talent show for you. And the adults were like, okay. It is deeply and exceptionally Mormon to do a talent show. And oftentimes Mormons tend to be very talented when it comes to like musical instruments, musical theater, singing, that sort of thing. So maybe it was actually some quality entertainment, especially with those 13 siblings. You've got enough people there that maybe someone in the mix was talented. A couple of weeks ago, I took my kids alone to a family reunion with my in-laws. You are strong and you are brave, whoever you are. We had a great time, but there was one evening where we had played all day and I never got the opportunity to use the bathroom because I was so busy caring for kids and doing the activities. I finally got to go to the bathroom at the cabin I was sharing with 15 other people, and I did a relieving number 2. I clogged the toilet. I plunged that sucker for a good half hour and it would not go down. I started texting my sisters-in-law to send help after a full 45 minutes of plunging, only to have my mother-in-law be the one to come rescue me. She flushed with the hope of plunging it all down, and it flooded my shit everywhere. I was completely mortified. This is my absolute worst nightmare. I was completely mortified, and it just kept getting worse and worse. She ended up bailing the water out of the toilet with a bowl in the bathtub and eventually successfully plunged the toilet, but only after her beautiful long pants were completely saturated in toilet water. To complete the whole experience, she insisted she would clean the toilet so I could enjoy my experience at the reunion. Bless her, she was so kind the whole time. It felt like I had my own personal Snow White plunging my shit. I will never live it down. Shout out to that mother-in-law. She sounds like such a gem. I'm actually thinking of my mother-in-law, and she is actually probably like top 5 people I would want around were I to find myself in this predicament, because she would probably show up in this exact same way. Why is there nothing more embarrassing than clogging a toilet? And especially when you're sharing a bathroom, because then it becomes everyone's problem. It's just one of the most embarrassing things I can imagine. And the fact that you didn't have your husband there, because whether you're with your in-laws, I mean, I guess if I was with my family, that's like the least embarrassing situation it could happen in. But when you're with your in-laws and not to be able to just like, I would make Bentley pretend it was his. That's what I would do. If I was at a family reunion and that happened, I would call Bentley and I would say, this was you. This was not me. And you will tell everyone this was you. I don't think I could own up to it. Oh gosh, that one will haunt me for the rest of my days. Sounds like you handled it like a champ. During the depths of COVID, my in-laws rented a cabin in the middle of nowhere for a few days. Long story short, my brother-in-law and his family of 6 little kids all arrived super sick and gave everyone COVID. I knew in my gut it was COVID and suggested they just go home and get tested, but everyone else was just like, oh, it's just a cold. It was hell that weekend trying to stay away from them. Then, lo and behold, I was correct. Everyone tested positive for COVID when we got back home. This brother-in-law and his family always come to family functions sick and then always get everyone else sick. It's hella annoying and inconsiderate. They're also the most devout LDS family in our family, so take that as you will. LOL. Ever since having kids, I have become so crazy, probably too crazy about sickness. And this it sucks no matter what. This might also be a twin mom thing, because if one of my daughters gets sick, the other one will inevitably get sick. So I know that I'm going to be dealing with 2 sick toddlers, which that's kind of how it is, I guess, if you have multiple kids anyway. Twins maybe just exacerbates it, because they're literally like, I can't keep them from sharing. They share water bottles, they share toys, they take baths together. Like, they just are so in each other's world that it just spreads sickness. I was actually at a family trip. This was last summer, and it was nobody's fault because they didn't know their kid was sick before. But my nephew threw up, like he had the flu, and we literally packed up and went home. People might think I'm crazy for that, but I'm like, I cannot be in a cabin with my daughters having the flu, and I didn't want them to get the flu before. I was like, let's just get home, because what if they got it and then we had to drive home? I just can't. I'm a baby about that kind of stuff. And yeah, that was no one's fault because they didn't know. But if I knew that someone had knowingly brought 6 sick kids during the height of the COVID pandemic, I would not be well. This person did mention they were the most devout LDS of the family. The only connection I can think of there is that a lot of Mormons get married young, have kids young, have a lot of kids young. And so I feel like because of that, they simply have to be lax parents. They can't be like hands-on as much, or they can't be as not even involved. It's just like, it is what it is, right? You have 6 kids and you're maybe 32. So things fall through the cracks. There may be a little more lax on things like sickness, or they're like, oh, we want to go. One of our kids is always sick, whatever. incredibly frustrating. Incredibly frustrating when people are sick and just like, oh, sorry, we're just all here in the cabin together. 2 cousins made out in the closet at one of my family reunions, and hardly anyone in my family knows about it. Uh-oh. That's not good. Kissing cousins. Lots of stories about kissing cousins. I was remembering that from last year's episode on family reunions, that there was some weird, like, romantic cousin stuff. Maybe again, well, maybe it's the product of gigantic families, so you can like theoretically meet a cousin and be like, it's almost like meeting a stranger. Or maybe there's something about the generational trauma or weirdness of cousins getting married, especially in early Mormon circles. I don't know what it is, but it ain't right. That much I do know. As a 27-year-old ex-Mormon, my parents made my boyfriend and I sleep in separate bedrooms when we visited for family reunions for the first 2 years of our relationship. We were already living together at the time, but they insisted that it made them uncomfortable and wouldn't happen under their roof. They finally caved after year 3, but I'm still salty about it. My older brother, who got married at 21, has always been treated like an adult, but I was still being treated like a high schooler just because I wasn't married yet. This is incredibly annoying. And this is where we see one of the many times that we see this letter of the law adherence being so arbitrary because, okay, yeah, you believe that 2 grown adults, if they're not married, should not have sex. You know that having them not sleep in the same room is not preventing the bad thing from happening that these parents think is a bad thing. It's more so just making them feel shitty about it, putting your line in the sand of like shame and judgment, essentially, and then creating a massive inconvenience. I'm working right now on an episode that I'm super excited about. It will be called Codependent No Mormon, because I read Codependent No More last month, and I kept being struck by how much I think Mormonism fosters codependence in families and in communities. And since I've had that premise, I've been doing some research. Dr. Julie Hanks randomly was just sharing some like really interesting stuff about this. But I do think this is such a codependent thing for parents to feel like they can in any way, like be in charge of how these grown adults are acting. This actually came up for me at a family reunion that we were on, where a parent expressed disapproval with their kids' decisions around substances with like weed and alcohol. And I just find it so bizarre because in what world does a parent get to tell like a 30-something-year-old what they can and can't put in their body? And obviously I understand if like addiction becomes a problem or if it's like a legitimate issue and if someone needs to step in and intervene, sure. But if someone is just like responsibly using a substance, for a parent to chastise a grown adult is really bizarre to me. And it's so counterproductive because when A, has that ever worked? And B, when has that ever led to more closeness and authenticity? And I just feel like as a parent, I hope more than anything to foster closeness and authenticity with my children. And of course, when they're younger, like you need to help guide their choices and things like that. But I just feel like some Mormon parents have a really hard time giving that up. And it just creates so much friction and distance that it seems so clear. Like, why is it more worth it to you to take a stand on this rule that you believe in than it is to just like make sure your kids feel loved and accepted and comfortable? And I think there's a lot of codependent dynamics at play there. Next one. My grandpa has an identical twin. The family's favorite thing to do at family reunions was show all the new grandchildren to the wrong grandpa, watch them gleefully run up to him for hugs, then witness their confused and horrified reactions when their real grandpa entered the room a minute later. 10 out of 10 hilarity. As someone who has twins, I end up talking about twins all the time. It's weird, like once you have twins, you realize how many twins are in the world. Because adult twins, you usually don't know if an adult is a twin because they're not like walking around with their twin. But when I'm with my twins, or like I was just barely at an ultrasound appointment for my IUD, they were like checking my IUD placement. And so she was asking if I had kids. I said I had twins, and she's like, oh, I have twins. And so we were able to talk about twins. So I just hear a lot about twins, a lot of twin stories, twin experiences. It's like a niche fascination of mine. And I love hearing about identical twins because I do think it's very, very different from fraternal twins. My twins could never. They just like look too different. And I can't imagine what it would be like to be able to swap places with another human being and have people genuinely not be able to tell the difference. Like that is just something that most of us will never experience. And I do think that I would have a lot of fun with it if I did have the opportunity. My sisters and I look a lot alike, and we actually considered in high school like trying to swap out for each other in classes just to see if anyone would notice, because people would get us confused a lot, but we're nowhere near like identical twin look-alikeness. So being an identical twin sounds so much fun that way. I will say, in my experience, meeting identical twins, there is usually so much love and just like, they're like, it's the best thing ever. I'm obsessed with my twin. And then in the same breath, like it was really, really hard to constantly be confused for someone else and to like almost kind of feel replaceable. I've sensed a lot of times, like, as you can imagine, like a lot of identity stuff with identical twins that's really hard. I'm hoping that with my girls being fraternal, with looking very different, that they are spared from some of that and get like the good parts of like the friendship and growing up together, but not as much of the like people can't tell us apart stuff. So we'll see. That is my hope for them. This story was told to me by my cousin at our family reunion. My dad's new wife asked my aunt, who left the church over 30 years ago, if there was anything she needed to know before going to the reunion in a couple of weeks. Her response was, don't drink from any of the kids' cups. Another aunt, this cousin's mom, said, yeah, obviously, that's gross. Why would she think to drink from the little kids' sticky cups? To which my cousin answered, Mom, she's not talking about the little kids. She means the big kids and their Stanleys. You don't want a sip of what they're drinking. We're all adults now, and many of us cousins have left the church, so we were up at the lake all weekend getting lit from our water bottles full of alcohol. She also warned to not go on any, quote, nature walks with my brother. And then there's the leaves/weed emoji. You guys are getting lit at your Mormon family reunions. Maybe next year. That's the answer for me. This year, actually, at one of the family reunions, there's a bunch of cousins who have left the church on Bentley side. And so we went up one night. There was like a fire pit, and we just like, nothing crazy, just like had some drinks and talked about leaving the church, my favorite thing to do. And it was actually really nice and really healing. But having secret alcohol in a Stanley cup is a whole nother level. Some of you were writing in that you were doing edibles at your family reunions, like your Mormon family reunions. I really do love the idea of like a group of cousins getting together that have all left and being like, why not? Like, let's just have some fun with this, and getting high or getting a little tipsy while on the family reunion. You got to do what you got to do. And I don't doubt that it made the reunion a lot more fun and probably a lot more palatable as well. So I am the oldest granddaughter on my mom's side of the family. All of my siblings and I were born before the rest of our cousins, with about 11 years between me and my next oldest cousin. We've done family reunions every summer for years, and it wasn't something I looked forward to as a kid. My siblings and I are pretty self-sufficient, so when the adults in the family wanted to do something without kids, they'd leave me in charge. I was often saddled with 4 toddlers for several hours while the adults played games or went out to eat. I also had to put said toddlers to bed some nights. It bothered the hell out of me. Like, this is a vacation for everyone, not just the adults. I complained to my mom, who is the oldest of her siblings, and she agreed that it wasn't fair. She tried to talk to my aunts and uncles, but no real change happened that year. Luckily, she is the pettiest, most intelligent, best mother on earth. What a compliment. because she had a backup plan for the next year. She said, "So they treat you like a babysitter? Then that's what you'll be." Throughout the next week-long reunion, she helped me keep track of how long I watched the kids and whose kids I watched. Then we totaled up a fee based on a $10 per hour pay, plus extra if I put the kids to bed. I confronted my aunts and uncles saying they owed me $200 for watching their kids. When they looked to my mom for answers, she just shrugged and laughed. We negotiated and I only got $100, but I've never had to babysit during a reunion again. Love the pod and hope your family is doing well. Thank you. That is such an incredible story. Like, what a badass mom to be like, okay, you want her labor, then you'll pay for her labor. I really take issue with the parentification of older kids in Mormon families, which happens all too often. I hear about it all the time. These families that have, 7, 8, 9 kids, of course, the older kids end up taking care of the younger siblings. And it's so unfair. It's unpaid labor. These are children. Obviously, yeah, kids can help around the house and help out here and there. But the level to which this happens, I think, is just so unfair for the kids, and also happens, to this person's point, like outside of just the immediate family. I feel like especially younger girls or like tween girls in Mormon contexts, maybe religious contexts generally, are just like, oh, they can just watch the kids, as if that's not like, number one, a job, and number two, like maybe a job they don't want to do. I babysat all growing up. I did get paid for it, but I hated it. I hated babysitting, but I still did it. Like I was still a nanny. I still babysat in some ways just because it's a job you can do when you're younger. But I remember one day being like, I'd rather just have a different job. Like, I don't need to be a nanny, but it just is like the job that so many women do is childcare. And you think like, oh, I'm learning to be a mom. And I remember the day I was like, I don't want to watch children. I don't want to watch other people's children. So I'm just like going to go get a job. Then I worked at a snow cone shack and I liked it a whole lot better. Someone said, "My favorite thing about family reunions is how everybody likes each other a little less afterward." That one made me laugh so hard. I immediately sent it to my family and we were all laughing together. Everybody likes each other just a little less afterward. We went to Bear Lake every year with all my cousins for our family reunion. I was 18. I wore a black bikini. Gasp. I received multiple negative comments on my swimsuit, including my male cousin saying, "Does your mom know you're wearing that?" I was an adult. Then the real kicker was a week later, my female cousin, who is a year older than me, invited me boating with her boyfriend and her brothers, but she made sure to tell me, and I quote, "Wear a modest swimsuit so everyone can feel comfortable." 12 years later, for whatever reason, everyone has chilled out, and most of my cute cousins wear whatever swimwear they want without the negative comments. I'm so glad for them, but also they have no idea what it was like for the older grandkids with the expectations of being perfect Mormon rule followers. I'm number 6 out of nearly 40. This year, the New Mexico cousins came to the reunion, and it was the first year with openly drinking alcohol. It was so refreshing. I have almost this exact same experience. My sisters and I, on my mom's side of the family, we weren't the oldest, but we were in the group of the oldest, and most of the other oldest cousins just like were very good rule followers, I guess. And my sister and I were not so much, especially when it came to modesty. I dyed the ends of my hair pink, things like that. I got so much shit for it. Actually, more so my mom got shit for it. And it was like always a thing of like, we need to dress more modestly and da-da-da-da. We had boyfriends and like my mom got shit for that. Well, guess what? Everyone kept having kids, and that younger generation ended up doing the exact same thing as my sisters and I, and they didn't get shit for it. And I'm okay with that. I'm happy. I feel like it takes people to push back against family cultures for there to be change. And I think ultimately, like a lot of people just realized once their kids were the ones doing that, like, oh, this is just, I mean, it is what it is. There's only so much you can do. But it can be a little frustrating when you're like, if only you knew the things that we dealt with, the shit we had to deal with for wearing a bikini. And now like all my cousins, seriously, same thing with bikinis. Now all my younger cousins do. And it's just like not a problem, which is good. It's progress. But I wonder if they know, actually. Maybe I should tell them. Maybe I should tell them of the path I paved for them to wear those bikinis. I have such a good story for you that's more lighthearted and sweet. When I was about 8 years old, I was at a family reunion where they decided to auction off a few belongings of some relatives who had passed away. Among the items were pieces of gold and sapphire jewelry that had belonged to my great aunt. I was in love with the jewelry and I was dead set on winning it. Since I was the only girl cousin, I didn't think I had much competition. When the bidding started, to my horror, my uncle stepped in and started bidding, and he kept outbidding me. I bid as high as I could, which probably wasn't much, and then finally he ended up winning. This uncle was kind of the black sheep of the family, so in my little kid brain, I assumed it was because he was just a mean man. I was crushed. As I looked one last time at the beautiful sapphire necklace I'd wanted so badly, something unexpected happened. My uncle walked over and picked up the necklace. He held it out to me, placed it in my palm, and gently closed my fingers around it. Then he handed me all the jewelry he just won. I was completely in shock. It's still one of the kindest things anyone's ever done for me, and a moment I will never forget. This one made me cry the first time I read it. It's so sweet and special. And this is like the best case scenario, the best of family reunions is like, I feel like every family reunion I go to, I end up weirdly connecting with like my cousin's husband who I've never met. And we just like have a really nice chat about something. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like this was so nice to connect with you in this way. Or like a random uncle, a random aunt. And I do think there is something so special and powerful about family bonds that is, it's weird because it's like, I don't even know these people so well, but I still feel around them that they are family. And this story is just so tender, especially thinking about that uncle being the black sheep and that like really strong connective moment across like through family, but with a generation separate, it's just really special. When our first baby was just a few weeks old, we flew across the country for a huge extended family reunion on my husband's side. Another family was assigned to be in charge, so we had no idea what to expect. We showed up and they had rented an 8-bedroom cabin for 50 to 60 people. They assigned us to share a bedroom with my parents-in-law, who I was not very comfortable with. Plus, we had a newborn that we got up with during the night, and I was generally just an anxious new mom. I was so upset about it. My husband and I took the lumpy, broken futon, and both of my in-laws snored louder than anyone I had ever heard in my life. Several people slept out on the porch or on couches in the living rooms. The whole reunion was a complete disaster. Typical Mormon family trying to cut corners to save money when they should have just rented 2 cabins so each couple/family could have a room to themselves. No, 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 no. A new mom should never. This is in the book of scripture by Haley. I will stand by this. This is a hill I will die on. A new mother should never, ever have to share a room with anybody else beside their husband and their newborn baby. Having to share a room when you're already getting up at night, worrying about other people being woken up by your baby while you're no, that is ludicrous. And having to sleep on a lumpy futon, maybe I'm a diva, I don't know, call me a diva, but I would not be sleeping on a lumpy futon at any point after, if I was a teenager, at any point as an adult, and never, ever, ever as a recently postpartum mom to a newborn baby. Sleep is too important, you guys. I actually have a nightmare sleep story from a family reunion 2 years ago. My husband's family used to go to Flaming Gorge, and we stayed in these like cabin-ish things, but it was kind of like camping. It was like you had a cabin. It didn't have, maybe it had a sink and a microwave, but then you had to go to like a shared bathroom, and it was like it wasn't even glamping. It was more like camping, but with a cabin. And I didn't want to go because the twins were very young, and sleeping is just such a big thing for me, as you just heard. And anyway, I got convinced to go, and we had one night of sleep there. It was the 4th of July, and it was the worst night of sleep I think the girls have ever had. Like, they just mostly did not sleep. And then finally they fell asleep, and then fireworks went off outside the cabin. It was so awful. And we drove home the next day. I was like, I'm not doing it. Sleep is so important to me, and it's something I'm trying to chill out about because sometimes I feel like I over prioritize sleep and I just get too control freak about it. I'm a recovering control freak, okay? I am realizing the extent of my control freakness. I've always known it's true, but I'm realizing the extent of it. So I'm trying to be less that way. But I do think when you have young children, you deserve to prioritize sleep. And if that means missing out on a family reunion for that year, whatever it may be, if you need someone to tell you, you deserve it. And that is, I think, a reasonable boundary. I'm here to tell you. In an ideal world, we would have just like rented a cabin that had like a better sleeping situation that wasn't like where everyone else was. But anyway, we didn't do that at the time and definitely regretted it very much. And yeah, being in that close of quarters, I'm telling you, it just creates too much chaos and it's just not worth it. Adults need a little bit of space, at least when they go to sleep at night. Oh, here's some hope core for you. I just got back from a family reunion on my husband's side. I am so close with all of his family and have been in the family since I was 15. All of his family are fairly active LDS, besides my mother-in-law and part of her family, and no one really knows I'm no longer believing besides some of my husband's immediate family. One night, my husband, who is still believing/active, went to bed early and I stayed up talking to some of his aunts and uncles. We started talking about politics, of course, and it ended up streaming into LGBTQ plus topics. His uncle had some different opinions than I did on the subject, and I feel like for the first time in my life, I had the confidence to, very respectfully, tell him that I disagreed. Yes, that's hard. Not only with your own uncle, but with your in-law uncle. That's brave. It ended up coming out that I didn't believe in the church anymore. We had a 2-hour-long conversation about my beliefs, core values, how I plan to teach and raise my children, etc. I was shocked at how respectful, kind, honest, and loving the conversation was. They had so many questions and were genuinely curious about my feelings and perspective. They, of course, low-key bore their testimonies and told me to keep my relationship with Jesus, but also were very kind and open and genuine the whole conversation. They reminded me that this was a safe space. They told me they loved me and how grateful they were for me, opening up to them and trusting them enough to share my experience. During the conversation, one uncle looked at me and said, "I had no idea you were going through this. I have always thought you had such a light about you, and still you have such a light about you. This does not and will never change that." Oh gosh, that's so sweet. I'm tearing up thinking about that moment and how much it meant that they still saw me for who I am and not just my differing religious beliefs. I'm so grateful I had this opportunity to share, as they all had never talked to someone going through this. It makes me so happy they were able to hear and learn a different perspective other than the narrative they have heard about ex-Mormons/non-believers their whole lives. It was the strongest I felt the spirit in a long time. I really love hearing that. And I hope so much that that is more and more the case with differing religious beliefs across the board and families. And yeah, there's like a sameness that feels required, I think, in a lot of Mormon families, especially these Mormon families of like generations where it's like, no, we're not just a family, we're a Mormon family. And so much of the togetherness is predicated on the Mormonism, the shared Mormonism. And I hope people are learning how to branch out of that and move beyond that. And I think it's a stronger kind of love when it's not because of shared Mormonism. It's beyond that. It feels like it transcends that in a lot of ways. And that's just a really beautiful story to illustrate that. Someone said, "I had 2 back-to-back family reunions 2 weeks in a row. My husband's family first, then mine, both filled with drama. Is there a family out there that all gets along? If so, how? I am now emotionally barren, and if I never saw my in-laws ever again, it would be too soon." I didn't write this, but it's funny how similar this is to what I was saying earlier. I love my in-laws dearly. I really do love my in-laws so dearly. But yeah, there are definitely times when with the whole family that I'm like, what is this for? And the thing I've noticed about being around my family is that sometimes I start acting like I'm 14 again. Like I will literally be fighting with my sister and take a step back and be like, why am I fighting with you about this? It's like when you're around your family, you can revert so easily back to like your teen or your childhood self. So it tends to get more dramatic. And a lot of it's just because that's where you feel safest. You really can be yourself. And so oftentimes it turns into like drama like that. But yeah, it can definitely be draining to be around family for too much time and in too close of quarters, as I have said many a time this episode. I think I'll also add that to the scripture of Haley is don't be in too close of quarters with family. Even on family trips, I'm all about family trips. I think it's super fun, especially immediate family. That's another thing I've been thinking lately is like, I feel like I'm at a time in my life. I love my extended family on all sides, but I just really want to prioritize, first of all, my family, me, Bentley, and the girls. And then next priority is like my mom and siblings, Bentley's parents and siblings. And I just feel like we're hanging on to, not we, but there's still this hanging on to like extended family stuff that is so nice when it can happen. And it oftentimes feels like so fun to see extended family, but it just becomes unmanageable when you're like trying to keep up on all of those relationships all the time. So I'm really trying to get better at just prioritizing like me, Bentley, and the girls, and then that next layer. And then the extended family layer is like a nice bonus if possible. Thank you so much for writing in your family reunion stories. I love doing this topic, and it was very cathartic for me after having some stories and experiences of my own. I so appreciate you being here. If you enjoy the podcast, a review, a rating would mean the absolute world to me. You can go follow along on YouTube at Girls Camp Podcast, on Instagram at Girls Camp Podcast, on TikTok, Haley Rawl. I also have a Patreon. So if you're craving some more content, patreon.com/girlscamp. I do 2 bonus episodes a month. And yeah, we have a lot of fun over there. Can't wait to talk to you next week. Bye. GIRL